Welcome back to another episode of PB&J. As I told you guys last week, it's going to be a lot more J than PB this month. Pastor, we miss you. We can't wait to have you back next month. That being said, last week, guys, I appreciate everybody that had great things to say about the episode of the Rainbow Warrior, the man with many coats of colors, Joseph. I told you guys that this month we're going to talk about redemption. We're going to talk about salvation a little bit, and we're going to use some stories from the Bible that kind of show redemption before Jesus came and gave the ultimate sacrifice. Now, look, Joseph last week was a polarizing character, and we have a guy who was rough at the start and figured his way to success after that. This time today, we're going to talk about another Bible hero, a man who had long hair, a man who had a Nazarite oath from birth, whose parents gave him to God, to be used by God. We find this guy in the book of Judges. This guy is known for his strength, his feats, but he's also known for the defeat he got at the hands of the Philistines and Delilah. And that person is Samson. Now, while we could do the Broadway theatrical version of this, I want to take a really deep dive into some ideas and some concepts from Samson's life. Now, Samson, as I just said, was born of a Nazarite, as a Nazarite oath. So he was a gift to God. You find that in Judges 13. Okay, so in Judges 13 is where the story begins. Judges 13, Samson is born. I'll read it right here. In verse 1 of Judges 13, again, the Israelites did an evil in the eyes of the Lord, so the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. That's a lifetime. That's a generation in the Bible. A certain man of Zorah named Manoah from the clan of the Danites had a wife who was childless, unable to give birth. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, "You are barren and childless, but you are going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. Now see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and have a son whose head is never to be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazarite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will take lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines." So, right off the bat, we see God once again meeting a woman in a place of vulnerability. I have never been in a situation like these women, like Sarai in Genesis, like Samson's mother here in Judges, or even Samuel's mom, the prophet Samuel. I don't know what it's like to not be able to have children, be in a situation, a relationship where that's just not possible. But I can't imagine what it's like to go through some of that pain um, for those people. And not that you could ever experience it without experiencing it, but there is a beauty that God continues to meet these women in these areas of their lives where their biggest weakness, their biggest insecurity is being used for God's glory. So, as I said here, a Nazarite dedicated to God. Part of the Nazarite oath is that you don't drink anything fermented, no wine, you don't get drunk, and you don't eat of anything unclean. So both of those things are part of Samson's story. Now, when we kind of get more into this story, okay, Manoah, Samson's father, he tells, after his wife tells him about this angel, he asks to hear the same thing. The angel comes and tells him the same thing he told his wife. And then they made an offering to the Lord and kind of gave their one. But that's kind of how he's born. So after Samson's born, now he's already been proclaimed to be the savior of the Israelites from the hands of the Philistines. Now, the Philistines may sound familiar to you because those are the same Philistines that had Goliath later on when David takes care of him. So, look, in Judges 14, we kind of fast forward here through Samson's life. Samson falls for what a lot of people in the Bible, we talked about it last week. Joseph didn't fall for it, but lust is a big theme in the Old Testament. A lot of Bible characters, we'll talk about this next week with our character next week, but this week, lust is a big thing. It tripped up King David. It trips up a lot of people. But remember, it's not just lust. Saul struggled with lust for power, lust for praise. And so lust is not always a sexual thing. I think a lot of times we fall into the trap of making lust sexual. But for Samson, unfortunately, his lust for women is a stronghold on his life. And so we start to see some cracks in the foundation of this man who is supposed to be the deliverer of the Israelites. So in Judges 14, Samson is walking, and he saw a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. His father and mother replied, Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among all our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife? But Samson said to his father, Get her for me. She's the right one for me. His parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines, for at that time they were ruling over Israel. You see here that there are other prophets in the Bible that have been asked to and have done things with foreign women and with women to make a statement to Israel through them. There's a prophet who had to marry a prostitute and had to go pay for her nightly to get her back after she gave up her services to show for God to use that as an example of what Israel's doing to him. So it's not unlikely or uncommon for God to use relationships like this to make a statement to the Israelites. So when Samson went down, they were going through the vineyards of Timnah, and suddenly a young lion came roaring toward him. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, so he tore the lion apart with his bare hands as he might have torn a young goat. But he told neither his father nor his mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and he liked her. So this right here shows the first signs of Samson's godly strength. Pastor likes to give the illustration that it's a lot better of a story if Samson looked like an average Joe and had the strength of Mr. Olympia, right? Because God's strength on him, giving him the ordinary, making it extraordinary, which is what the Spirit of God does to all of us once we have it inside of us. So he does this, okay? He doesn't tell his parents aren't with him. And so he kills this lion. Sometime later, when he went back to marry her, this is verse 8 of Judges 14, he turned aside to look at the lion's carcass, and in it he saw a swarm of bees and some honey. He scooped out the honey with his hands and ate. He went along. When he rejoined his parents, he gave them some, and they too ate. But he did not tell them that he had taken the honey from a lion's carcass. Now, the reason that that's important is because part of the Nazirite oath is that you eat nothing unclean or from the dead. And while honey was not necessarily made by a dead lion, it was made in a dead lion, which therefore makes the honey contaminated for this Nazirite oath. And what we're going to talk about here in a little bit, but I want to kind of preface it here. You're going to see that these strands, everybody talks about Samson's hair, but the oath and the law and the breaking of the oath happened way before Delilah ever cuts any hairs off of Samson's head. So Samson eats that. Samson then goes to a dinner right after that with the woman. They had a feast. When the people saw him, they chose 30 men to be his companions. Let me tell you a riddle. Samson said to them, this is verse 12, if you can give me the answer within the 7 days of the feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. If you can't tell me the answer, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. Tell us your riddle, and then let's hear it. He replied, out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. For 3 days they could not give the answer. On the fourth day, they said to Samson's wife, coax your husband to explain the riddle for us, or we will burn you and your father's household to death. Did you invite us here to steal our property? Samson's wife threw herself at him, begging, you hate me. You don't really love me. You've been giving my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer. I haven't even explained it to my father or mother, he replied, so why should I explain it to you? She cried the whole 7 days of the feast. So the seventh day he finally told her. Because she continued to press him, she in turn explained the riddle to her people. Before sunset on the seventh day, the men of the town said to him, what is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? Samson said to them, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle. Then the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. He went down to Ashkelon, struck down 30 of their men, stripped them of everything, and gave their clothes to those who had explained the riddle. Burning with anger, he returned to his father's home, and Samson's wife was given one of his companions who attended him at the feast. So this is the first time that Samson's lust and Samson's choice in women come to get him. This is definitely a preface to what happens with Delilah here in a few chapters in Judges. But the important thing is that the 7-day feast, some scholars and theologians believe that this feast was a 7-day drinking binge. Now, usually this is where I would look at Pastor and ask him if that's true. He's not here. So I'm going to say it in with quotations around it, because it's not my thoughts, but it's something I came across when studying for this episode. Some people believe that the Hebrew word that's used here for feast is describing drinking. And so now you're seeing the second thing that he breaks of the Nazarite oath, which is drunkenness, which is drinking the fermented wine. That's the second strike on Samson's record, if you're keeping track. He is now eaten something unclean and of the dead, and now has drinking fermented drink, which is wine. So we're 0 for 2 right now, Sammy. We're 0 for 2 right now, but you still see guys using him. So in Judges 15, Samson is at the time of the wheat harvest. He took a young goat and went to visit his wife. He said, "I'm going to my wife's room," but his father would not let him go in. Verse 2, "I was so sure you hated her," he said, "that I gave her to your companion. Isn't your younger sister more attractive? Take her instead." Or isn't her younger sister, attractive? Take her instead. Samson said to them, "This time I have right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them." So he went out and caught 300 foxes and tied them tail to tail in pairs. Then he fastened a torch to each pair of tails, lit the torches, and let the foxes loose in the standing grain of the Philistines. He burned up the shocks and standing grain together with the vineyards and olive groves. When the Philistines asked who did this, they were told Samson the Timonite's son-in-law, because his wife was given to his companion. So the Philistines went up and burned her and her fathers to death. Samson said to them, "Since you've acted like this, I swear that I won't stop until I get my revenge on you." He attacked them viciously and slaughtered many of them. Then he went down and stayed in a cave in the rock of Edom. The Philistines went up and camped in Judah, spreading out near Lehi. The people of Judah asked, "Why have you come to fight us?" "We have come to take Samson prisoner," they answered, "to do to him as he did to us." Verse 11, "Then 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cave in the rock of Edom and said to Samson, 'Don't you realize that the Philistines are rulers over us? Why have you done this to us?' He answered, 'I merely did to them what they did to me.' They said to him, 'We've come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines.' Samson said, 'Swear to me that you won't kill me yourselves.' 'Agreed,' they answered. 'He will only tie you up and hand you over to them. We will not kill you.' So they bound him up with 2 new ropes and led him to the rock. As he approached Lehi, the Philistines came toward him shouting. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. The ropes of his arms became like charred flax, and the bindings dropped from his hands. Finding a fresh jawbone of a donkey, he grabbed it and struck down 1,000 men. Then Samson said, 'With a donkey's bone I have made donkeys of them. With a donkey's jawbone I have killed 1,000 men.'" So you see again right here. So Samson takes a little bit of revenge on the Philistines. The Philistines come to Judah to get their revenge on Samson. The children of Israel, like they have done many times so far in this Old Testament up to this point, they get scared and they turn over their very own to, stay clear of any trouble with their supposed leaders. Once that happens and once that goes on, you see that Samson gets the power of God on him. So Samson has made 2 mistakes so far, but God's still using him for his purpose. Samson then uses that ability and strength to make an impact by using a donkey bone to kill 1,000 men. Now, for those of you adults listening, when he says, "I have made donkeys of them with a donkey's jawbone," you know what that means. I know what that means. We know the term for donkey. So don't say that there isn't any humor in the Bible, right? But Samson's very clear that he was. After that, in verse 18, because he was very thirsty, he cried out to the Lord, "You've given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" And God opened up the hollow place in Lehi, and the water came out of it. When Samson drank, his strength returned, and he revived. So the spring was called En-Hakkore, and it is still there in Lehi. Samson led Israel for 20 years in the days of the Philistines. So, like a lot of these judges and prophets that we've read about so far and that are going to continue to come, get a little dramatic. He's kind of like Elijah, he needed a snack and a nap. Samson just had a great victory and is crying because he's a little thirsty, right? And God provides, which is something that you have to remember, is God always provides for us. In Judges 16, we get to Delilah. Now, this is the part you've all been waiting for. This is the part where all of the stories are made, and this is the beauty of this is what you hear about in Sunday school. This is what preachers preach about from the pulpit. We forget about all the other stuff that Samson got to at this point. Now, up to this point, Samson has made, like I said, two big mistakes. Okay, he has eaten something unclean, and as some theologians believe, he has drank fermented stuff for 7 days, feasting with his boys after a victory. Okay, Samson is now coming off of now leading for 20 years in over the Israelites as their judge, and also killing 1,000 guys with a jawbone, which is pretty impressive. Okay, but in Judges 16 we meet Delilah. Okay, one day Samson went to Gaza, where he saw a prostitute. He went in to spend the night with her. The people of Gaza were told Samson is here, so they surrounded the place and lay and wait for him all night at the city gate. They made no move during the night, saying, "At dawn we'll kill him." But Samson lay there only until the middle of the night. Then he got up and took hold of the doors of the city gate, together with 2 posts, and tore them loose, bar and all. He lifted them to his shoulders and carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. Sometime later, he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name is Delilah. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, "If you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength and how we can overpower him so we may tie him up and subdue him, each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver." So right here, um, you see that Samson still has really good strength. He obviously has moved on from his wife and her death, and he is doing things there. Now, the Philistines want him. They want him. They can't figure out how to get him because of God's protection on him. Okay. They now use an easy ploy for some reason for most men of the Old Testament and most men of today in the faith, which is lust and beauty and vanity. So they asked Delilah to go get it. Okay. Now, Delilah said to Samson, "Tell me the secret of your great strength." This is verse 6 of Judges 16, "and how you can be tied up and subdued." Samson answered, "If anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings, they have not been dried. I'll become as weak as any other man." And the rulers of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh bowstrings. They had not been dried. She tied him with them, with men hidden in the room. She called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But he snapped the bowstrings as easily as a piece of string snaps when it comes close to a flame. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. Then Elias said to Samson, "You have made a fool of me. You lied to me. Come now, tell me how you can be tied." He said, "If anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used, I'll become as weak as any other man." So Delilah took new ropes and tied him with them. Then the men hidden in the room, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He snapped the ropes, and they were threads, or like they were threads. So then Delilah says again to Samson, this is the 3rd time, "All this time you have been making a fool of me and lying to me. Tell me how you can be tied." He replied, "If you weave 7 braids of my hair into fabric on the loom and tighten with a pin, I'll become as weak as any other man." So while he was sleeping, Delilah took 7 braids of his head, wove them into fabric, tightened it with a pin. Again she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He awoke from his sleep, pulled up the pin and the loom with the fabric. Then she said to him, "How can you say I love you when you won't confide in me?" This is verse 15. "Who told me the secret of your great strength?" With such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was sick to death of it. So we don't know how many days that was. But what I do know is that we're talking about 2 times now that he's messed up on this Nazarite oath. Well, we're about to see number 3 here. And while the Bible does make it pretty clear that she continues to nag him, we only get 3 instances of her asking. That's going to be important here in just a second. Then she said to him, "How can you say I love you?" Right? And that's what she said. She prodded him. Verse 17, so he told her everything. "No razor has been used on my head," he said, "because I have been a Nazarite dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I become as weak as any other man." When Delilah saw that he told her everything, she sent the word to the rulers of the Philistines, "Come back once more. He has told me everything." So the rulers of the Philistines returned with silver in their hands. After putting him to sleep on her lap, she called for some to shave off the 7 braids of his hair, and so began to subdue him, and the strength had left him. Then she called, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He awoke from his sleep and thought, "I'll go out as before and shake myself free." But he did not know the Lord had left him. Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, took him to Gaza, binding him with bronze shackles. They set him grinding grain in the prison. But the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. Okay? So you see right there, Samson has now told the truth to Delilah. And he's also broken strike 3 on the Nazarite oath. And then God leaves him. But see, even Samson has missed the point of where his strength came from. And before we get into that, I want to talk to you real quick about how the redemption of Samson happens. And then we'll talk about exactly what Samson missed in his own miracles before it was too late. So in verse 23 of Judges 16, now the rulers of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their God, and celebrate, saying, our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands. When the people saw him, they praised their God, saying, our God has delivered our enemy into our hands, the one who laid waste to our land and multiplied our slain. While they were in high spirits, they shouted, bring out Samson to entertain us. So they called Samson out of the prison, and he performed for them. When they stood him among the pillars, Samson said to the servant who held his hand, put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so that I may lean against them. Now the temple was crowded with men and women. All the rulers of the Philistines were there, and on the roof were about 3,000 men and women watching Samson perform. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me, with one blow, get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. Then Samson reached toward the 2 central pillars of the temple, bracing himself against them, his right hand on one and his left hand on the other. Verse 30 says, Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. Then he pushed with all his might, and down came the temple and the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more when he died than while he lived. Then his brothers and fathers, whole family, went down to get him. They brought him back and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in a tomb of Manoah, his father. He had led Israel 20 years. So after he gets captured, okay, the Philistines make a mockery of him. Okay, they make him, do a little dance, do a little song. But Samson does something that I think is also overlooked sometimes in the story as well. And he understands and he humbles himself and realizes that it was only God who gave him all his strength and all his power. And when he asks God to return to him what he needs, he sacrifices himself for the better of his people and to get revenge for his 2 eyes. Right. And so the beauty of the story of Samson is not the strength. And while it makes good movies and good plays, it's not about Delilah. It's not about his hair. It's about obedience. See, what we miss in Sunday school when we talk about this story, or what we miss sometimes when we tell this story from the pulpits, is that Samson didn't lose his power because his hair got cut. In fact, he started to lose his power and his grip on his connection with God way back when he killed that lion and ate that honey. And while you may not see it, and it's easy to overlook it when you're reading the story, sometimes when we make mistakes, there isn't always immediate repercussions, whether it be in the kingdom or in the world. He ate that honey, and he still got to lead Israel for 20 years. And then after that, he, uh, may or may not have had a 7-day drinking binge and still led Israel for 20 years. And then he got his hair cut, and still, even though that was it and he lost his strength, he was still able to find God and find strength one last time to fulfill, his calling. But it's all about obedience. And while some of you may not have the same kind of pressure and the same kind of build that Samson did when you came out of your mother's womb, once we're born again, we have that same due diligence to be obedient to Jesus' words, to the Bible, to God's words, and to living the right way and doing the right things. And that may not always be easy. And sometimes our flesh gets in the way. Sometimes we think that we know better. Just like sometimes a toddler thinks they know better than their parents, or a teenager thinks that they're grown. Samson's story is not about a haircut. And if we think that's all it's about, we're missing it. There are 3 separate occasions where you realize that Samson missed the bigger picture. And like most of us, when things are going well, we have the blessing of God in our lives, we get lost in the sauce. We get lost in the commotion of the ocean. And all of those things sound really good and they feel really good in the moment. But then one day, you're going to have to answer for those things. And so while Samson had God leave him and lost his strength and lost his ability to make an impact where he was, he also was able to humble himself. And when we humble ourselves and understand that we have somebody we have to answer to, that we are not doing this thing under our own accord, we too can turn from those things and make an impact with God's help again. See, Samson had God's power on him. We have God's power in us. Pastor would tell you the same thing if he was here, right? God's power is in us. That was the beauty of the cross. Okay, don't forget Good Friday. Don't forget Resurrection Sunday. The power of the cross gives that power in us. We have an ability to check ourselves and stay humble. And the Spirit is in us to give us conviction of what we do wrong. That's why I think it's something cheeky to say, like, don't get a haircut or don't eat honey. In a very serious note, Samson's story is a warning to us that disobedience has consequences. And while Samson may have died physically, if we continue to be disobedient, we'll die spiritually. That only makes our physical death that much more depressing. So my call to you today, as you listen to this and as you read Judges, hopefully on your own, take away what you want, is that it's a culmination of disobedience that separates us from God. Not one singular event. That's not always the case that separates us. It's a culmination of our decisions that define us. You can't blame anybody else. Samson can't blame his mother and father. You can't blame Delilah. You can't even blame the woman in Tinma. When we think about this and when we talk about this, Samson's story is one that we should all feel one way or another. Because God gives us a purpose and He gives us a plan and He gives us a promise. But if we can't be obedient to what He's called us to do, we can lose sight and we can feel like we're all alone. But the beauty of the promise and the beauty of redemption is that we are never alone. And I hope you can take that with you as you go into the weekend. I appreciate you guys joining me again for another episode of PB&J. And as always, go and grow with purpose. Peace.